Kia ora koutou, I'm Kylie from Oranga Kindergarten. Thank you for all being here today. I'm definitely no public speaker, but I am very, very passionate about sharing this information with you. The journey that we have been on as teams for the last 2 years and the steps we have taken towards more effective practice for our families and our children at Oranga Kindergarten and at Greenhithe Kindergarten.
There were 2 dynamic teaching teams involved in this research project, one from Greenhithe and one from Oranga. The teams were culturally diverse and came from 2 distinct communities within the greater Auckland area. Over the course of 2 years, the kindergarten teams engaged in a series of activities, all with the express purpose of answering their primary inquiry question. What adjustments do we as practitioners need to make to our current assessment practices to better inform parents and school teachers about children's achievement at the point of transition? To answer this question, they read international and national literature on a wide variety of topics related to transition of children from kindergarten to primary school, engaged in rigorous group discussions, conducted focus groups with key stakeholders to better understand their perspective and experience, worked with children in their kindergartens to prepare them for the transition, designed documents to capture information about the transitioning child and communicate it to others, trialed the documents with children, their families, and primary school teachers, revised them based on feedback, and trialed them once again, and reflected on their individual learning and collective progress towards team goals. At the end of the project, team members felt that they had gained considerable knowledge, skills, and understanding of the process, while simultaneously strengthening relationships with other key stakeholders in the project.
We quickly realised that we had a unique opportunity to construct a process for transition that was actively involved families from start to finish.
Participating in this research, I have strengthened my belief that this intersetting communication between the early childhood sector and the primary school environment has a profound effect on the experiences children may have when they start school.
Transition is a journey, it's not a point in time, so it's not just sort of walk out of kindergarten, go to school and you've transitioned, it's an ongoing process.
So you can see the title of our project here. I'll give you a few seconds to read through it. So basically summarised, we wanted to find out what adjustments we as teachers needed to make to our current assessment practices to better inform parents and primary teachers about children's learning and development at the point of transition. We later changed this point of transition to be during transition. A Teacher-Led Innovation Fund, or TLIF for short, provides fundings for groups of individuals in schooling and ECE to develop innovative practices in order to improve the learning outcomes for our children. These were normally given to schools, but in this circumstance, it was the first grant given to us in the ECE sector. But first, let me introduce you to the teams that worked on the project. So Oranga Kindergarten is based in Onehunga, central east of Auckland. It's an Auckland Kindergarten Association kindergarten, so AKA for short. We do have a very transient community. It is a diverse socio-economic area, and there's 2 main feeder schools for us. Oranga Primary, which approximately 80% of children go to, and Te Papapa Primary, where 20% go to. Our researchers, there's myself as the head teacher, Kylie. We have Kay Hoffman, who's one of the teachers, and Hazel Lamsam. Greenhithe Kindergarten is based in the northwest of Auckland. It's also an AKA, or Auckland Kindergarten Association kindergarten. It is based in a high socio-economic area and has 1 main feeder school, which is Greenhithe School, with approximately 95% of the children going to. Our Greenhithe researchers are Jess, Ellis, who's the new head teacher there. Cheryl, who couldn't be here tonight, and there was Kate Butcher, who was the previous head teacher, who was also one of the main leads on this project, but she went to work for Evolve at the beginning of this year. So hopefully we'll get to disseminate this learning to all the Evolve centres later. Dr Rachel Williamson-Dean was our expert partner from the Woolf Fisher Research Centre. So for this project, our expert consultant worked closely with the TLIF teachers to co-design the project initially. Having an external expert as part of the TLIF structure, and we're very lucky to have Dr. Rachel with us. She was really instrumental in keeping the project focused and manageable. Dr. Rachel managed the project ethically and facilitated each of the phases by role modelling a cyclic process of inquiry, each time building upon the previous phase. Dr. Rachel ensured that all participants were heard, and she assisted us as teachers to become more familiar with the whole process of research. She specifically coached participants to study a practitioner inquiry in their own context. She supplied us with a very large array of literature, and she summarised our progress back to us for discussion. She really honoured the difference between this type of practitioner research and externally conducted research. Thank you. So, introducing the project. The main purpose of this project was to come together as two separate kindergarten teams and engage in a guided and systematic process of inquiry. We really wanted to improve the experiences for the transitioning child, their families, and also for the teachers in both school and in the kindergartens. We wanted to seek out the opinions of all parties so that we could come to an understanding about what the collective aspirations for our tamariki were, not just us as having a teacher's voice. As part of the project, we set out to develop a system for documenting, communicating the individual learning of children's development as they go off to school. So the phases began and ended with a group meeting and involved a lengthy period of inquiry. At the beginning and end of each phase, the external consultant, Dr. Rachel, prepared a summary report for all of us. These reports summarised the important findings and then provided a list of further questions to guide us in inquiry. So you'll see that here that there are 3 different stakeholders listed: the kindergarten teachers, the primary school teachers, and the whānau. The children were the key stakeholders, but were not interviewed formally by Dr. Rachel, so they do not appear here. We will talk more on their involvement later. So we gathered data for phases 2, 3, and 4 with the use of semi-structured group interviews. Qualitative data was collected through these interviews with parents and primary teachers at the beginning of the project phases 3 and 4. This data was then used to inform the impending cycle for that phase. Focus group data was also collected from the kindergarten teachers, varying from full team focus interviews in phase 2 to individual phases in phase 3 and written responses on group questions in phase 4. We will look over these phases 1 to 5 briefly over the next 30 minutes. We measured shifts in teachers' practice and children's learning against key goals in this project. To do this, a project-specific rubric was designed. The TLIF team, using this rubric during the initial phase 1 of the project, collected baseline data on teacher practice and child learning. The rubric was designed to monitor and to evaluate changes or shifts in teachers' practice and also in child's learning. This rubric was written with the teacher's current practice at the beginning of the project reflected in the lower stages of the rubric, and with the overall intended outcomes of the project as best practice at the end of the upper stages of the rubric. The rubric was aligned with the assessment intent expressed in Te Whāriki in the New Zealand curriculum and with reference to the standards of teaching profession and the ERO education review indicators. We then completed self-reported judgments on our own practice using this rubric at the end of each phase of the project. We drew on evidence that we had to support our judgments and discussed an overall measure for the kindergartens based on our individual responses. The purpose of phase 1 was to introduce the project and to come to understand the expectations and the roles of everyone that was involved in it. At this stage, there was some agreement on language and inquiry questions, and there were many discussions that were had amongst us. We agreed on a cycle of inquiry, and we firmed up how we would measure these shifts in teacher practice also. So, the reading of copious amounts of literature was a huge part of our phase 1. Of particular interest were the New Zealand readings that outlined the ways that different early childhood providers approached transition. This prompted us to really take a broad look at our own existing practices and processes and how we could make this fit into our own communities. I have a handout for you of the literature that we found really helpful. If you would like this after the hui today, you're most welcome to come and see us and we'll give you the list. Here's a short clip of Jess, one of our teachers on the team, reflecting on some of the literature.
So in this project there was a lot of readings and literature that we had to read through, which I found quite interesting as some of them were based in different countries around the world. So it's always good to read on something about transition to school from a different country and to see what they do and what their process is. One main theme that I felt that came out of these readings was the importance of communication and relationships between the kindergarten teachers, the parents, as well as the primary school teachers. Throughout the literature, there was one main common theme that I found, which was the importance of communication and relationships between the different stakeholders, so the kindergarten teachers themselves, the parents, as well as the primary school teachers, in regards to making the transition to school process as smooth as possible.
So reading the first 2 points on the findings of phase 1, there were minor variations in the ways that individual teachers and the kindergartens as a whole assess, document and communicate the learning and development of children attending their kindergartens. And there was also a significant variation in the transition to school process between our 2 kindergartens and between the 3 schools that were involved in the project. As was mentioned, you can see that the readings offered perspectives from a range of stakeholders, and at this stage we really needed to have that shared understanding and that shared language when it came to the assessment of children's capabilities. So our first step was to analyse and define those so that we're all operating together on the same understanding. So phase 2 was focused on us as kindergarten teachers, really looking deeply at what we value, what we know, and what we need to share with our tamariki, about our tamariki in this process. We were formally interviewed at this stage by our expert consultant, Dr Rachel. So there was a general inquiry question. What information about children's learning do we as ECE teachers believe will best support their transition to school, and what does this mean for our assessment practices? This was divided into 3 separate inquiry questions that guided our work during the phase. So you can read them here on this slide. As we worked on answering these questions, we were aware that we really needed to also ask, what is the valued learning here, and what is important to share to both the primary school teachers and the parents? At this time, no specific changes were made in the ways in which we as teachers documented or communicated the child's learning, communicated information about the children's learning that were transitioning. We were open and at this stage very eager to make changes, but it was very important to wait until we got feedback from our other key stakeholders. So we needed to wait for the primary school teachers and the whānau before we did so. So in phase 3, Dr. Rachel interviewed the primary teachers using questions that we had all had input into. Having Dr. Rachel do the interviewing of the teachers meant that their privacy was protected and ensured that they would not be hampered in any of the responses given. And it was impartial and external to our day-to-day lives as connected colleagues. The feedback meeting was held with 2 kindergarten leads, Dr. Rachel, and 2 representatives from each of the primary schools involved in the project. This was an opportunity to hear from the schools about recent initiatives that they had had in welcoming children to school, both in their pedagogy and in their systems, and in particular around play-based learning. So after the focus group interviews with the primary teachers had been collated, we analysed what this meant for us under the 4 main headings listed here. So I'll read them. The relationship with the primary school, children's learning and development, what is valued learning, and how does this line up with the kindergarten thinking? Documenting and communicating information, what do they find helpful, and reimagining the transition. By this stage, we were really starting to see the similarities and differences in beliefs, differences in beliefs and values we shared as teachers in the 2 different sectors. Even though our contexts were very different, it was quite obvious at this stage that we had more similarities in what we valued than differences. So the primary school teacher's main interest was in receiving information about the social and emotional competence and ability of children to self-regulate rather than academic skills such as reading and writing. The primary teachers favoured the one-on-one conversations as they had reported some challenges in finding the time required to complete readings and reporting, as it is a significant addition to their workload. So they preferred a verbal approach to communication. During this phase, we as kindergarten teachers began to connect the dots from our readings into reality. For us, the period of transition, the point of transition, then became to us the period of transition. The kindergarten teams had concluded their clearer understanding of what the transitional period constitutes. It is more the 6 months before a child starts school and the 6 months after, so a long period. With the above in mind, we then identified a general structure for the final TLIF tool and system. These included resources related to both a process or a timeline and the products for assessing a child's development and learning during the transitional period. The products were varied and they included documents to be completed by the child, by the AKA teachers and by the families as well. The primary outcome of phase 3 was the development of an AKA teacher document, a document created to prompt conversations between the kindergarten teachers and the primary school teachers. I will explain this further on the following slide. So after the findings of phase 3, we started trialling the use of a conversation prompting framework as teachers, testing how it would work with a selection of children, and it consisted of 3 main parts. Part 1. The individual child. What have we discovered about this child as a unique individual? Part 2, the child's growth. How has this child grown during their time at kindergarten and how have their experiences shaped them? Part 3, child's approaches to learning. How does this child learn best? How have these approaches to learning changed? So teachers at the 2 separate kindergartens met together as a team, using the richness of the children's individual portfolios, their learning stories, any previous teaching assessments, parents' shared knowledge, and the child's own self-assessments and goal setting to fuel conversations amongst ourselves as to what could be shared with the primary teachers, the parents, and the children. When we were completing this document, we used the reporting strategies of dispositions, social competence, emotional competence, physical competence, academic competence, and cultural competence, as these were the shared areas of value from our stakeholders as confirmed in all of the external interviews that were conducted. While trialling this document, we moderated our responses by requiring each teacher to fill out one for the same child and afterwards checking through it so that we can see that the understanding of who that child was aligned. At Oranga Kindergarten, we meet together every Thursday afternoon for approximately 30 minutes to have these robust conversations about 3 children that have previously been selected. We have a list that we go through to ensure all children are included. Using the above tools mentioned, for example, the priceless learning stories, the children's own assessments, that we document our findings to share with our key stakeholders. We have found this to be very beneficial in aligning our thinking and communicating important information effectively. Here is a short clip of Hazel's reflection on the documents that were created.
Through the TLIF project, a number of documents were designed and trialed. Can you please tell us about this process and about the documents that were created?
At the beginning of phase 1, our kindergarten was using learners' books, and at that time I was confident that they would be a useful indicator of a child's readiness for school, but unfortunately they did prove to be time-consuming for teachers to collate. However, the Stars and Wish document gave us a valuable understanding of children's perspectives, and they revealed depth of insight that we'd not been able to capture in the learners' books. Over the research period, the document was refined to enable teachers and tamariki to see where and why shifts in children's aspirations have occurred. We also added a document on which the whānau could articulate their perspectives for the hopes for the child. It was always the intent of the project to develop a tool that matched the research findings as they unfolded, and those findings led to the development of the Conversation Prompting Framework document, or CPF. It was intended to be used as a summary of any shared knowledge about the child. That summary would then be able to prompt a conversation with the primary school teachers, which would be specifically centred on the child, their dispositions, their progress during the kindergarten period prior to entry to school. The CPF was trialled by both teams and found to be the most useful for children who'd not been at kindergarten for long and had therefore not had previous assessments completed. For those children who'd not been at kindergarten very long, the CPF would work well because it enhances focus on the child and their progress and the conversations that largely took place between parents and our team. Those conversations, once recorded on the CPF, can be shared with the primary school teacher. So when you don't have a lot of recorded information about a child, a really useful document.
So we keep on refining this type of document, but the process always remains the same. It is a reflection on the child's learning using input from previous assessments, their learning stories, children's own self-assessment and goal settings, as well as parental shared knowledge. Here is a clip of Kay reflecting on communication and the potential for learners.
I have learned through readings, research and experience that face-to-face meetings where conversations are open and focus on the individual child gave us a better insight onto the child's learning potential.
In phase 4, families and whānau were asked the same question as the other groups. What did they think was important to know about a child's abilities, skills and learning as they prepare for the transition into primary school? We then use the findings to explore the implications that this would have on our assessment and our teaching practices and ultimately on the outcomes for the tamariki. Here's a short clip of Kay reflecting on the parents' needs to have correct information and us as teachers having a role in providing this information about the schools.
Through my experience before and during this research, I have found that if there is not a teacher that is in charge of the transition to school visits and ensuring there is regular contact between the two sectors, then the connections may not happen. It is important that parents receive the right information about their local schools. It doesn't matter if parents miss school visits, as long as the kindergarten teachers are aware of the programs in the primary school so that they can pass on accurate information to the parents. Readings and research around transition to school, parents' voice, personal experience as a parent and now as a teacher, and our parents that were interviewed as part of this research show that often parents are informed about schools through friendships or word of mouth. Most of this time, this information cannot be substantiated. Parents need to be properly informed so that they can make the best choice for their child based on fact rather than hearsay. It is also noted in research that often the parents' anxiety of the unknown can influence how their child will transition over to school.
So parents were in agreement with teachers about what should be shared. They did not have strong views on this generally, but they were more interested in the process, especially on the school side. The team then began creating a transition timeline with all the key events and activities for the transition included in it, and a set of transition tools, including the conversation prompting framework, some child voice framework formats that teachers could use to assist them during this period of transition. These tools were used to capture evidence of learning and communicate it with all of the key stakeholders. In a moment, I will show you a timeline of processes for transition that we created at Oranga Kindergarten. Hazel and Kay are passing some examples around to you now, so please pass one along. Hazel talks further on this clip that I will play shortly, but I will briefly explain the purpose of the timeline to you. Just waiting till everybody has one. Okay. So as you can see, this process starts at least 6 months before the child goes to school and continues on for approximately 6 months after the child starts school. This timeline is a prompt to us as teachers to keep having those robust conversations with the children, the parents, and the primary school teachers over an extended timeline. It's really about fostering those positive and proactive relationships and serves as a reminder to us to ensure that we are making these happen. There are specific times in this process where we meet with each of the key stakeholders, starting with the parents right at the very beginning. So 6 months before the child is looking at going to school, we have a meeting or a hui with the family. It's only a short meeting, it normally takes only 5 minutes, and at that time we have a whānau hui form which we discuss with them. It includes information about what school the parents may think their child may attend, if they are wanting them to start when they're 5, or if they're flexible on this, if they have any concerns, if they have any questions, and what aspirations, dreams and hopes they may have for their child, or any particular interests and skills that they would like to see their child encouraged over the 6 months before they are starting school. We also created brochures to help parents at this time. It serves as a prompt for us. We sit with them and it gives them something to take away and something to look through and answer questions that they may have. This one is working together for our tamariki, creating a smooth transition into the school environment. It covers things such as encouraging the children's independence, what the parents can do at home to do this, sharing in their learning journey, having those transition conversations with us as teachers, the importance of regular attendance, the importance of sleep, and the importance of being on time. And on the back, it lists some other things that parents that will help to be aware of, as in, does the school have a zoning system, and making sure that they enrol their child at least 3 to 6 months before the child would be due to start at school. We also include the parents throughout this whole time, but at the end, when the child is due to go to school, a few weeks before, we sit down with the parents and they fill out a whānau hui form. A whānau assessment form. So on it, it has information that we then pass on to the primary school, so they can really get to know how the parents are feeling about their child and what concerns or interests that the child may have from the parent's viewpoint. So it has, what is my child a star at, their strengths and their interests, what do I want the teachers to know about my child, and what I would like to know. So if there's any questions that the parents have or are unsure of at the stage, we can then pass these on to the primary school teachers that they know, and they can help the families as well. The children are also a vital and major part to be included in this timeline, where they're included with their children's own goal setting and the children's own reflections on their learning throughout the entire process. At our kindergarten in Oranga, we use this type of tool. It doesn't have to be this way. It can be adapted to suit your communities, but this is what really worked for us. So this is an example. We use the 2 stars and a wish form. So we would sit with a child and go through 2 things that they think they are a star at, or they really love or enjoy at kindergarten. Then they make a wish. So the wish is basically their goal, where they would like to go with their interests, something they would like the teachers to help them with further, or anything in particular that really stands out for them. We then make a time to revisit this. So a couple of months later, we will take this and we will reread it with the children and revisit their stars and revisit the wish, and then we write their reflections on this. So we're really getting them to look back at their learning, see how they've achieved their goals, and then set further goals. At the point when the children are just about to go off to school, we have a little hui with them as well. So the teachers sit with the child one-on-one and ask them questions, which they already know by this stage because they're used to knowing and talking to the teachers about what they're a star at. So what am I a star at, or very good at, or love to do, or really enjoy, or have a big interest in? What should they know about me? So what kind of person, friend, learner, member of the class am I? And what do I want to do at school? Do I know anyone there? What do I already know about the school? And what have I heard about school? This is something the children are actually really excited to be a part of, and their parents love to see their reactions as well and read through, and it's put into their portfolio with their learning stories, and it's kept as a memento for the parents as well as being passed on to the primary school. So they're really getting the viewpoint from the child themselves and from the parents as well. So once a child leaves us, that shouldn't be the end of it. We should still be communicating with the parents and with the children and with the teachers. How did the transition go? How's that child progressing? And then we can take that info and then look at how we can further develop our processes for the existing children that are with us at kindergarten. Here is a clip of Hazel reflecting on the documents and the timeline that we've just been looking at now.
In your opinion, what are the strengths and the weaknesses of the documents that were created?
The documents themselves are really useful because they're simple, user-friendly. I believe that the self-assessment sheets are valid for all tamariki because their agency is visible in the process. You could probably improve it by maybe having a space for tamariki to include a drawing, which is a useful indicator of what they can do. The whānau assessment that we designed as well is equally as valuable. Making whānau aware of and active participants in the process has sometimes been challenging. Consideration may also need to be given to ESOL families. They've got much to contribute to their child's transition experience, but they might not understand the process. So as I worked through the process, it became clear that the term transition tool was misleading, and what really had to change was mindset. So we shouldn't think of the tool as a signpost, but as the road. The tool is the system that smooths the entire journey from kindergarten to primary. Briefly, the process timeline is as follows. 6 months before transition, families identify a school and teachers continue to document stars and a wish. School visits are arranged during the first 6 months. At around 2 weeks before transition, whānau and tamariki have the opportunity to arrange a time to chat with kindergarten teachers who invite the next steps of involvement in the process. Shortly before the transition date, kindergarten teachers meet with primary teachers to have a brief hui about the assessments completed by the tamariki and families. Both the child and whānau assessment sheets are given to the primary school. The research trial shows that at Oranga's discussions with the primary teachers was informed by the knowledge of the child through previous assessments. The kindergartens who do not do regular assessments, they would benefit from using the conversation prompting framework document to support the primary kindergarten teacher discussion. A farewell celebration is held at kindergarten. Post-transition connections with families are maintained with continual visits for other tamariki, as well as through direct contact via Story Park, for instance. Most tamariki will generally start kindergarten 24 to 12 months before attending school, and that gives us ample time to get to know families, to nurture positive learning dispositions in tamariki by the time they're ready to start the transition process. They tend to remain at primary school for at least their first year, so follow-up helps to weave a strong community connection between families and both education sectors. A few issues have challenged the timeline. These include tamariki who start kindergarten less than 6 months before they're due to start school, families who don't enrol their child into school until they've left kindergarten, and tamariki whose attendance at kindergarten or school is erratic. A significant challenge has been making time for the conversation meetings. Teachers and families have got huge demands on their time, so a real robust transition system can help. Kindergarten teachers have to complete the appropriate documentation and school visits in a timely manner, and that just enhances the validity of the process. The strength of the timeline is the continuity. As we get better at arranging the meetings and the documentation, we should see significant benefits for transitioning tamariki in all areas of the primary school curriculum. Whānau have had an opportunity to become more involved in the process and have responded positively.
They have. So previously I had mentioned that although the children were not formally interviewed by our expert consultant, Dr Rachel, they were essential to the entire process and were active participants in their own learning and in their transition journey. In the following clip, I talk briefly about child agency and participating in their own learning and assessment. On a side note, I apologise for my nails. I'm a teacher and we've been doing dye beforehand.
When teachers work with children on their self-assessment, whether it's the 2 stars in the wish or the what I want the teachers to know about me, it's important that we keep it fun. It has to be done in a quiet, calm place, one-on-one, avoiding other distractions around. Even if for a couple of minutes, it's really, really worthwhile. We need to give the child time to focus and space to get into the mindset, and they really do deserve this time. It gives them opportunity to speak their mind, to voice any concerns that may have arisen, if they're worried, wondering if they will have friends or if they would know anyone.
So the main purpose for this phase, our final phase, phase 5, was to create the final version of our T-Lift tools and look at and redefine everything that we had been creating. We created some videos, some of which we're seeing today, and we are beginning to share this to the wider ECE community, which we're doing tonight. So Hazel and Kay are currently handing out some brochures to you. These are basically our findings and a little bit about our project in a nutshell. But if you, I'll wait till everybody gets one first. All right. Okay, so if you turn to the back page, it has our key findings in a nutshell. We really came to the conclusion that transition isn't just one moment in time, it's a timeline of processes around communication. And the importance of fostering positive and proactive relationships between parents, primary school teachers and children is paramount. It's the relationships that are really the key. We need to have these robust conversations with parents and teachers over an extended timeline while involving the children's input into their own learning and their transition journey. So the primary school teachers' primary interest was in receiving information about the social, emotional competencies and abilities of children to self-regulate rather than academic skills such as reading and writing. So it's more about encouraging those children's social competencies so that they can listen, they can take turns, they can problem solve, hear another's viewpoints, and not about knowing their letters, reading or writing. So our findings showed that verbal communication is the most effective for sharing of assessment information in our kindergartens at Oranga and Greenhithe. The research revealed that paper-based assessment tools are often not read, shared purposely, nor contributed to by all parties. This means that ECE services should prioritise these verbal conversations during the period of transition and allocate the time for them to take place. The challenge then for us is to enable resourcing for these conversations to take place, as we all know as teachers how limited we are on time and how precious it is to us. It is important to ensure that the children's learning can be shared by all, importantly including contribution from the child and from their families. Our research revealed that each school takes a different approach, and the ECE teachers have an important role in knowing about the differences in approaches and communicating these to our parents so that they can make informed choices. Likewise, schools have a role in ensuring parent information for new families is current, is readily accessible and targeted to families' needs. We would go as far as to suggest that schools consult with parents about how they find the school starting experience and include questions leading up to and incorporating the months leading up to the child's arrival on their first day. This would give schools a better indication of what parents may be finding challenging and what could be altered. This is particularly true where we have communities or families who may not have a strong command of English or English literacy yet, and or families who come from a different country where the schooling system may be very unfamiliar to them here. Kindergarten teachers have also realised through this project that we may have differing understandings than primary school teachers about what learning through play means. This means there's an opportunity for further research in this area, particularly as new entrance classes are seeking to incorporate more play-based learning in their curriculum. So lead teachers in this project reported our own and our team's greater confidence and engagement in professional conversations, the ability to challenge preconceived viewpoints and to have critical discussions about issues affecting the wider ECE sector in general. Even though this research project did come with challenges, the extra workload for us and not enough non-contact time, we really bonded together as a team, and this has been an incredibly positive outcome on our journey together. A few weeks ago, I was invited to one of our local primary school to along with some other local ECE providers, a daycare and a private kindy, to have discussions about the transition to school process and what was happening for them. When they spoke, it was more for skills focused, so focusing on taking readers home and writing along the line and letters and such. And it really reinforced with me the importance to spread this knowledge wider, that we may know this information, but it's important to share it with all our fellow early childhood providers. And the way that this could possibly be done is through our local COLs or our community of learning. We really need to spread the knowledge that being ready for school doesn't mean children need to acquire specific academic skills and knowledge. Instead, we need to work together with our children, our teachers, and our families to create an environment of communication, and along with the use of engaging, child-centered learning experiences, help children to become and to see themselves as competent, lifelong learners. So we wouldn't have been able to do this project without our key stakeholders. So I really want to say thank you to our beautiful tamariki that were part of this project, Oranga Primary School, Te Papapa Primary School, Green Heights Primary School, and everyone else that was involved. Thank you.